Storms have a way of remembering what people try to forget. When Ezra Boone, a quiet black teenager with no family, but a loyal dog, found an old envelope with his name written in fading ink, he didn't realize he was holding the key to a secret buried for generations. Every lie in Ash Hollow began to tremble that night. By the time the truth surfaced, the town that once ignored him would be forced to remember his name. If stories like this leave you thinking long after they end, hit like subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you think was really hidden behind the Boone name. 13-year-old Ezra Boone, a quiet black boy living under the weary roof of a foster home on the edge of Ashfield County, had learned not to expect mail, much less miracles. That's why when a soft knock came at the door in the middle of a thunderstorm, he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him again. The Crawleys, his foster parents, were glued to the TV arguing over lottery numbers and beer money. The rest of the kids were asleep upstairs, mouths open, dreams filled with anything but rain. But something in that knock felt deliberate, like the world was gently trying to get his attention. He opened the door and found nothing but darkness, wind, and a single yellowed envelope pressed against the step. It looked like it had traveled through decades of dust just to find him. His name, Ezra Boone, was written in careful, old-fashioned script. Nobody had ever written his name like that before. Not teachers, not social workers, not the Crawleys. He hesitated before picking it up, afraid it would vanish if he blinked. Inside, by the flickering light of the old kitchen bulb, he opened the envelope with shaking fingers. A paper slipped out, thick, official-looking, and stamped with wax. The heading read, Deed of Property Transfer. The Jonas Boone Estate, Ash Hollow, North Carolina. His heart thudded like it was trying to read ahead. Beneath the seal, the words blurred for a second, as if his eyes couldn't believe them. The property was his. His. The name Boone appeared over and over again, belonging to people he had never met, but whose blood now ran in him like a quiet inheritance waiting to wake. In the background, Mrs. Crawley shouted for him to turn off the light and stop wasting electricity. He folded the papers quickly and hid them beneath his shirt. Nobody in this house cared about anything that didn't come with a government check. He went back to his small, cracked window room where the smell of wet clothes and mold clung to the air. His backpack sat in the corner with a few old notebooks and the tattered photograph of his mother smiling in front of a cabin, a mountain mist curling behind her. He ran his thumb along the picture, whispering, "Did you know, Mama? Did you know we had land?" He didn't know if he was talking to her or to the wind. Rufus, the stray mutt who always showed up at the back door during storms, whined softly outside. Ezra opened the window and let the dog climb in. Rufus was muddy and thin, with fur the color of rust and eyes that looked older than the hills. "You sticking with me again, huh?" Ezra smiled. The dog wagged his tail and curled up beside him on the bed. They shared the same kind of loneliness, the kind that doesn't need words to understand. Ezra unfolded the letter again. This time, he noticed something else inside a smaller note tucked between the pages. The handwriting was shakier. The ink faded but still legible. "If this finds you, the Boone blood still runs. The land waits. Keep it safe, for it keeps you." It wasn't signed. But below, in faint pencil, someone had written the initials JB, his great-grandfather. Maybe he didn't know. All he knew was that the rain outside suddenly sounded less like noise and more like a heartbeat. He imagined Ash Hollow mountains, wrapped in fog, an old wooden barn, the smell of pine and soil after rain. He imagined it was quiet there, safe, a place where the world didn't forget your name. The clock downstairs ticked endlessly, but never moved. He wondered if time had stopped just for him tonight. When thunder struck again, Rufus raised his head and growled low. Ezra turned toward the window. Through the streaks of rain, he saw movement near the mailbox. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the shape didn't sway. It stood still, tall, watching. Lightning flashed and illuminated the outline of a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Ezra blinked and the figure was gone. He hurried to close the curtains, his heart racing. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe it was the neighbor, or maybe someone else. He climbed back into bed, pulling the blanket up to his chin. Rufus pressed against him, growling again before settling down. The boy reached down and rested his hand on the dog's neck. "It's okay, boy," he whispered. "Ain't nobody gonna take what's ours." He said it like a promise, though he didn't yet understand what ours meant. Sleep came in restless waves. He dreamed of forests whispering his name, of footsteps on old floorboards, of doors unlocking themselves. When dawn broke, the world smelled of wet earth and second chances. The Crawleys were gone, Mrs. Crawley off to the store, Mr. Crawley to the bar. The house was silent. Ezra packed what little he owned into his backpack, 2 shirts, his photo, a flashlight, the deed, and a can of beans. He slipped the letter into the inner pocket close to his chest. Rufus followed him to the porch, tail wagging slow, eyes alert. "You comin', ain't you?" Ezra asked. The dog didn't need to answer. Together they stepped out into the morning mist. The clouds were thinning sunlight breaking through in thin golden threads. The road stretched on like a ribbon of mud, and memory curling through the hills as if testing Ezra's resolve. He had been walking for hours, his backpack growing heavier with every step. Rufus padded beside him, tail-swaying eyes alert. The morning air was sharp with pine and distant rain, and somewhere far off thunder still rolled over the mountains like the echo of something ancient. Cars passed only once every hour, most too fast to notice a thin black boy and a muddy dog trudging along the shoulder. When the rumble of an old Buick slowed beside them, Ezra hesitated, one hand resting on Rufus's back. The driver, an elderly black woman with silver hair tied under a floral scarf, leaned out the window and smiled. "You Boone's boy?" she asked, in a voice that felt like warm cornbread and church hymns. "Name's Miss Delaney. Your mama used to help me clean the parish kitchen when she was just a girl." Ezra blinked. He hadn't heard anyone speak of his mother in years. "You knew my mama?" he asked softly. "Knew her heart better than most," Miss Delaney said. "Get in, child. Can't have you and that fine dog walking all the way to Ash Hollow on tired feet." Rufus sniffed the door, then jumped in first, settling beside Ezra on the cracked vinyl seat. The car smelled of lavender and old gospel tapes. As they drove, mist rolled down the hills, swallowing the road behind them. "Your granddaddy Jonas was a builder," Miss Delaney set, her eyes on the road. "Could make a lock no man could pick and a door no storm could break. Folks said he built half that hollow with his own hands." Ezra listened silent, his mind painting pictures of a man he never met, hammering nails into beams of a home that might still remember his touch. "He left it to you," she said softly. "Said one day the right blood would come back." They crossed an old wooden bridge, its boards groaning like tired bones. On the other side, the road narrowed, lined with dogwoods and moss-covered stones. "You'll see the old Boone gate soon," Miss Delaney said. "Ain't much left of the fence, but you'll feel it when you're there. Land's like memory, it don't forget who belongs." Rufus pressed his nose against the window and whined. The car slowed as the forest thickened, trees bending in toward the road like witnesses. Finally, they reached a rusted metal arch half buried in vines. The faded sign above it read, "Boone Estate." Miss Delaney parked the car and turned to him. "You be careful, Ezra. Folks been sniffing around here lately. Some say looking for treasure, some say looking for ghosts." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver cross on a chain. "This was your mama's. She gave it to me when she left for Raleigh. Said to keep it safe till her boy was ready." Her wrinkled hand closed around his, pressing the necklace into his palm. Ezra stared at it, his throat tight. The cross was warm, as if it had been waiting all these years just for this moment. "Thank you," he whispered. Miss Delaney smiled, faintly, eyes glistening. "You tell that land who you are when you step on it. It'll listen." Then she started the engine and drove off her taillights, fading into the mist until only the whisper of gravel remained. The silence that followed was deep, almost holy. Ezra turned to face the property. Beyond the fallen gate stretched 15 acres of tangled weeds, broken fences, and silence thick as smoke. The farmhouse leaned sideways, windows clouded, roof half caved in. The barn stood behind it, its doors chained but not locked, as though it was guarding secrets rather than keeping them in. Rufus barked once, tail stiff, then trotted ahead. "Easy boy," Ezra murmured, following. The grass reached his knees, heavy with dew. Every step made the ground sigh underfoot. When he reached the porch, the wood groaned, dust rising like breath from forgotten lungs. The front door swung inward with a long, tired creak. Inside, sunlight slipped through holes in the roof, striping the room in bands of gold and shadow. An old rocking chair sat in the corner, still moving slightly, as if someone had just risen from it. Ezra's pulse quickened. "Hello," he called softly. Only the wind answered, whispering through broken shutters. Rufus sniffed the floorboards, nose twitching. He circled near the fireplace, barked once, then ran outside again. Ezra followed, stepping off the porch and into the wild grass. The dog had stopped near the edge of the property, pawing at the earth. "What you got there?" Ezra asked, crouching down. Rufus dug faster, dirt flying until metal glinted through the soil. Ezra brushed it clean, a rusted horseshoe bent and worn, but shaped into a perfect heart. He turned it over in his hand, feeling the rough edges. It wasn't just a tool. It was a keepsake, something meant to last. The initials JB were carved faintly on the curve. Rufus wagged his tail tongue, lolling proud of his discovery. "Good boy," Ezra said quietly. The wind shifted, carrying a faint scent of wood smoke, though no fire burned nearby. For a moment he thought he heard faint humming, the same melody his mother used to sing when the nights got long. It came from the direction of the barn. He turned, but the door was still chained and silent. Maybe it was just the wind again. Still, the air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. He slipped the horseshoe into his pocket and whispered, "We're home, boy." Rufus barked softly, then laid down in the grass, eyes half closed, as if he agreed. The afternoon faded into amber light, painting the hills in long shadows. Ezra sat on the porch steps, staring at the mountains. He thought of Miss Delaney, of the stories she told of the land remembering its owners. Maybe the land did remember. Maybe it had been waiting all this time for someone with the same heartbeat, the same blood. He closed his eyes, the sound of the wind brushing against the trees, and felt something shift inside him, like a key turning quietly in a lock. Night came fast in the hollows. The morning in Ash Hollow came slow, dragging fog through the trees like a tired ghost. Ezra woke to the smell of wet wood and the sound of Rufus barking at nothing in particular. The boy rubbed his eyes, sat up on the porch, and saw that mist still hugged the valley like a secret it wasn't ready to share. His jacket was damp from dew, but he didn't mind. It was the first time in his life he'd fallen asleep somewhere that felt like it might belong to him. The horseshoe lay beside him, glinting faintly in the pale light, its curve still warm from where his hand had rested overnight. Rufus stood at the edge of the yard, ears perked, nose twitching toward the barn again. The chain on the barn door clinked softly in the wind, like it was calling them closer. "We'll get to it, boy," Ezra murmured. "But first, let's see what's left inside the house." The front door hung crooked its hinges, whining when he pushed. Inside, the air smelled of dust, pine, and thyme. Sunlight slipped through the broken slats, revealing layers of cobwebs hanging like forgotten curtains. The floor creaked under his sneakers, and each step stirred up motes that floated like tiny ghosts in the light. Furniture stood where it had been, abandoned chairs, a table, a rocking chair that still swayed as if someone had just stood up from it. On the mantel sat a cracked teacup and a rusted oil lamp beside a family Bible, so thick it could have been used as a weapon. Ezra brushed the dust away, revealing the faint engraving on the cover. The Boone Family, 1912. The sight made something twist in his chest. He opened it carefully, the spine groaning, and saw the names of generations written in elegant script. At the bottom, faint and half-faded, someone had written, Jonas Boone, 1946. The same initials carved into the horseshoe. J.B. Ezra whispered. Rufus trotted closer, sniffing the Bible tale swishing lightly, as if recognizing the scent of home. The boy's fingers traced the inked names. He wondered if any of these people had his eyes, his skin, his quiet way of holding things inside. Maybe they'd built this place with their own hands, never thinking one day it would all end up forgotten. He moved toward the staircase, but a loose board groaned underfoot, startling Rufus into a low bark. Ezra crouched to look beneath the step and noticed the glint of metal wedged between the boards. He pulled gently until the object slid free, a carved walking cane, its wood dark with age, smooth from use. The top was polished into the shape of a curled ram's horn, and along the shaft were the faint initials JB again. His breath caught. It was his great-grandfather's. He ran his hand over the carving, feeling the grooves where fingers had worn it down. Rufus sniffed the cane tail, thumping once. This was his, Ezra whispered. He was real boy, not just a name. As he turned the cane over, a faint click sounded near the base. A small panel slid loose, revealing a folded photograph inside. Ezra's heart hammered as he unfolded the brittle paper, afraid it might crumble in his hands. The picture showed a man standing in front of the same barn that now leaned in the yard. The man's beard was thick, his expression kind but proud. Beside him stood a woman in a long dress, and between them sat a dog, broad-chested, sharp-eyed, and unmistakably the same breed as Rufus. The fur pattern was nearly identical, right down to the pale patch above the nose. "That's you," Ezra breathed. "Or somebody just like you." Rufus wagged his tail and barked softly, as if in answer. Ezra turned the photo over. On the back, someone had written in pencil, Jonas Eliza, and Scout, 1935. He traced the letters slowly. "Scout," he murmured. "Your granddaddy, huh?" The coincidence felt too strange, too perfect. He looked down at Rufus, whose eyes gleamed with the same calm intelligence as the dog in the picture. Maybe it was nothing more than chance, but standing there in that sagging house, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that he and Rufus had been meant to find this place. A noise from upstairs snapped him out of the thought, a faint shuffle followed by a creak like a footstep. He froze. Rufus's ears pricked, his body tensing. "You hear that?" Ezra whispered. Another creak answered. The boy gripped the cane tightly and moved toward the stairs, each step protesting under his weight. The second-floor hallway was lined with faded wallpaper of yellowed roses. The first door on the right hung open just enough to see a rocking chair turned toward the window. He pushed the door gently. The chair rocked once, then stilled. No one was there. On the floor lay a doll missing one arm, and beside it, a music box. The lid was carved with initials, again EB for Eliza Boone. He turned the small crank, and a tune played softly, the same hymn Miss Delaney had been humming in the car the day before. The sound filled the room like a voice from the past, wrapping around him in comfort and sadness all at once. Rufus stepped closer, head tilted, tail still. When the melody ended, Ezra closed the lid, carefully tucking the box into his backpack. He felt like a thief of memories, yet the land seemed to welcome it, as if reclaiming what already belonged to him. He turned to leave when he noticed something carved into the window frame the heart remembers. The words were barely visible beneath the years of grime, but they felt heavy with meaning. Back downstairs, Ezra placed the photograph and cane on the mantel. "I think we're supposed to be here," he said softly. The house gave a long sigh in reply, wood creaking in the wind. Rufus barked once, then trotted toward the door leading to the yard where the fog had begun to lift. The day after Ezra discovered the cane and the photograph, the morning arrived gray, and still carrying the scent of damp wood and distant rain. The fog that had hidden the ridge began to rise, unveiling the rolling outline of the Blue Ridge Mountains like a slow reveal from a dream. Rufus barked at the creek behind the house, his reflection trembling in the current. Ezra stepped outside, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, still thinking about the photograph and the uncanny resemblance between the old boondog and Rufus. He couldn't stop replaying the thought that maybe fate wasn't random after all, that maybe something stronger had pulled him and the dog to this forgotten place. As he crouched by the creek to fill a cup from the cold, clean water, he heard a voice behind him say, "That stream's been running through Boone land since before my granddaddy was born." Startled, Ezra turned. Standing a few feet away on the other side of the creek was an old man in faded overalls, tall and weathered with hands like tree bark and eyes sharp as flint. His gray beard moved slightly in the breeze as he smiled, revealing a mouth missing more teeth than it kept. "Don't look so spooked, boy," the man said, stepping closer. "Name's Harlan Pitts. I live across that ridge yonder. Been keeping an eye on this property since your kin left." Ezra hesitated, keeping Rufus close, but there was something steady and harmless about the man's voice. "You knew my family?" he asked. Harlan nodded. "Knew your great-granddaddy Jonas better than most. Good man, proud man, worked his hands raw building that barn and every stick of this place. He used to say a Boone builds with heartwood, never soft pine." The word struck something in Ezra, an echo of pride he hadn't known he was allowed to feel. "You say you've been watching this place?" he asked. "Ain't been many to watch," Harlan said with a low chuckle. "But after Jonas passed, I promised him I'd look after it best I could." Thought his bloodline was gone, but here you are, standing on the same dirt, carrying the same look in your eyes. He leaned on a walking stick that might have been older than Ezra's foster home. Rufus sniffed the air, then wagged his tail once a rare approval. "Dog's a good judge," Harlan said. "Same breed as Jonas's old mutt scout. Funny how that works, ain't it?" Ezra nodded, his throat tight. "I found a picture of them," he said, "in the house, with a cane that's got his initials." Harlan's eyes lit with recognition. "The ram's horn handle?" he asked. Ezra nodded again. "Well, I'll be damned," Harlan muttered. "That old cane was more than decoration. Jonas carved it himself. Had a hollow chamber inside where he'd hide small trinkets. Man never trusted banks or strangers." Ezra hesitated. "You think he hid something in the house?" Harlan tilted his head, his gaze drifting toward the barn. "If I were you, I'd start looking where the wood sings when you step on it. Jonas used to say every secret got a sound if you listen right." The boy glanced toward the barn, the same thought crossing his mind. The sound of a memory calling through time. Harlan studied him for a moment, then lowered his voice. "You ain't the first to come sniffing around here lately. There's been a man in a black Buick parked near the old road. Don't live here, don't talk like mountain folk. Been asking questions about the Boone property. Said he's a historian, but I seen the kind of hands that man's got, they ain't scholars' hands." Ezra felt a chill run up his spine. "Did he come here? Twice?" Harlan said. "First time he walked up to the gate, stood there a spell, then left. Second time, I followed him quiet as a deer. He was poking around that barn door, took some photos, then drove off when he noticed me watching. Told me I didn't know what I was guarding." The old man spat into the creek, disgust curling his mouth. "You be careful, son. Whatever he's after, it ain't for history's sake." Ezra thought of the letter that had brought him here, of the chain on the barn, of the photograph tucked safe in his pocket. He looked at Harlan. "You think my great-granddaddy left something hidden?" Harlan's eyes narrowed. Jonas wasn't one for leaving much undone. If he hid something, it was because he wanted the right hands to find it. Maybe that's you. Rufus barked once as if agreeing. Harlan smiled faintly. "Dog seems to think so." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of yellowed paper. "Found this under the floorboard of my shed when I was fixing it last year. Ain't mine, and it's got Boone handwriting all over it. Figured it might mean more to you." He handed it across the creek. Ezra stepped forward to take it, unfolding it carefully. The note was short, written in the same script as the letter that had found him. If you read this, you've heard the song. 2 keys, 1 heart, 1 truth. Guard the door with faith, not fear. There was no signature, only the initials JB again. What song? Ezra asked. Harlan shrugged. Beats me. Maybe something to do with that music box of Eliza's. Jonas used to say it played the tune that could unlock heaven or hell, depending on who heard it. The boy felt a chill that wasn't from the wind. I found that music box yesterday, he said quietly. It still plays. Harlan stared at him for a long moment. Then maybe the land's starting to wake up for real. He reached into his coat once more, this time pulling out a small brass key on a string. Keep this, he said. I found it years ago in the hollow behind that barn. Never knew what it opened. Maybe it's been waiting for you. Ezra took it, the metal cold against his palm. Thank you, he said. Harlan tipped his hat. You stay close to that dog, boy. Ain't no better protection than loyalty that don't break. Rufus wagged his tail again as the man started to leave, stepping over the rocks of the creek like he'd done it 1,000 times. By the time the sun slipped behind the ridge that evening, Ash Hollow had gone completely still. The air smelled like rain waiting for its chance to fall again, and the cicadas in the tall grass sang their endless metallic song. Ezra sat on the porch steps with the brass key hanging from a string around his neck, the one Harlan Pitts had given him that morning. He turned it between his fingers, watching how the last of the daylight caught in its grooves. Rufus lay nearby, ears twitching occasionally, lifting his head to sniff the wind as if expecting something. The meeting with Harlan had left Ezra thinking of things he couldn't quite put into words. He believed now that the land was more than dirt and timber. It was alive in its own way, watching, remembering. The words from the letter echoed in his mind. 2 keys, 1 heart, 1 truth. He had 1 key from the music box and another from Harlan, but he still didn't understand what they were meant to open. The creek babbled quietly in the distance, and the barn beyond it stood in the dimming light, its chain doors glowing faintly orange from the setting sun. The chain rattled once, just enough to make Rufus lift his head and growl low. Probably the wind, Ezra said, though the air had gone dead calm. He picked up the cane with the initials JB and ran his thumb along the carved ram's horn at the top, remembering how Harlan had said Jonas made locks no man could pick. Maybe this cane was one of them. Maybe it was the first piece of the puzzle. He stood and looked towards the barn, its slats dark and weathered the air around it heavy, with a silence that didn't feel natural. Come on, boy, he said softly. Let's take a look. Rufus hesitated, then followed. They crossed the yard, the grass wet against Ezra's jeans, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the soft ground. When they reached the barn, Rufus whined, ears pinned back. The boy touched the chain, testing it. It was rusted but strong. Guess we're not going in tonight, he murmured. Still, he pressed his ear to the wood and thought he heard something faint inside, like breathing, slow and steady. He pulled back quickly, heart pounding. He waited, but the sound didn't come again. He shook his head. I'm just hearing things, he whispered. They returned to the porch, but Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was near. He decided to stay awake a while longer, just to be sure. The night came, fast clouds rolling in from the west. Lightning flickered silently in the distance, lighting the mountains like bones beneath a blanket of sky. Ezra sat by the window, his mother's photograph propped against the lamp, the cane resting across his knees. Rufus lay at his feet, snoring softly. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, sometime past midnight, Rufus's ears snapped upright. His growl started low, building into a rumble deep in his chest. Ezra sat up straight, listening. There it was, the crunch of gravel from the road below, then the distant hum of an engine cutting out. Headlights swept across the edge of the yard for a moment before vanishing. Rufus growled again. Ezra moved to the window. A black car sat parked just beyond the gate, its lights off now. the shape of a man stood beside it, moving toward the barn. Ezra's stomach tightened. "It's him," he whispered, the man Harlan warned about. He reached for the cane, the brass key swinging against his chest. Rufus was already at the door, muscles tense, ready to run. "Not yet," Ezra whispered. They watched from the porch's shadow as the figure approached the barn. The man carried a flashlight that he switched on only after he reached the doors. Its beam danced over the wood, over the chain, over the carved initials near the latch. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small set of tools, and began to work on the lock. Rufus couldn't hold still any longer. With a burst of motion, he leapt from the porch, growling loud enough to wake the trees. The man turned startled just as Rufus lunged. The flashlight hit the ground, its beam rolling wild across the grass as the two shapes collided in the dark. The man shouted, kicking, trying to shake the dog off. Rufus Ezra yelled, running forward, gripping the cane in both hands. The man yanked free his coat, ripping under Rufus's teeth. He stumbled back, cursed, and sprinted toward the gate. The car engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as the tires spun, and the black Buick sped down the hill, its red taillights flashing once before disappearing around the curve. Rufus stood panting in the yard, chest-heaving eyes locked on the road. Ezra knelt beside him, rubbing his fur. "You're okay, boy. You did good." The flashlight still lay on the ground, its beam faint now, but steady. Beside it, half buried in mud, was a torn piece of paper. Ezra picked it up, careful not to smear the ink. The page looked ripped from a notebook, water-stained but readable. The words were printed neatly. "Confirm Boone Air. Retrieve item before transfer. Marked K-79. His hands trembled. He didn't know what K-79 meant, but the note made it clear the man wasn't just curious. He was hunting something that belonged to the Boone family, something left behind and hidden. He folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket, glancing toward the barn again. The chain on the door swung slightly, tapping against the wood, even though the air was still. Rufus whined low and uncertain. "Yeah," Ezra murmured. "He's gonna come back." He walked to the porch, scanning the darkness for any sign of more movement, but the night had gone quiet again, too quiet. In the distance, thunder rolled closer this time. He sat on the steps, the cane across his knees again, the brass key clutched in one hand. Rufus settled beside him, keeping his eyes on the barn. The boy stared into the darkness, the note heavy in his pocket, and wondered how many secrets one family could bury before the ground started giving them back. The thought scared him, but it also made him feel something new belonging. Whatever danger was coming, it was his to face. The land had chosen him just like the letter said. And if this stranger wanted what was hidden, he'd have to go through a Boone to get it. The rain started again, light and steady, tapping the porch roof like the ticking of a clock that wouldn't stop. The boy and his dog didn't move. They sat and waited, guardians of a secret they didn't yet understand, but somehow already knew was worth protecting. The morning after the intruder came felt heavier than any before. The rain had passed, leaving behind a silence thick enough to hear every drop fall from the roof into the mud. Ezra hadn't slept much. His mind had been too full of questions and the image of the man in the black Buick driving off into the night. Rufus hadn't slept either, his ears twitching at every sound until the sky began to gray with dawn. When the first light touched the hills, Ezra stood up, slipped the brass key around his neck, and whispered, "Let's finish what he started, boy." Rufus wagged his tail, still wary, still protective but ready. The yard smelled of wet earth and pine. The barn looked different in daylight, still sagging, still old, but somehow watchful, as though it knew the night had tested them and found them worthy to move forward. Ezra stepped closer, noticing the fresh boot prints still pressed into the soft mud by the door. He could see where the man had knelt, where Rufus had lunged, and where the chain had rattled violently before the fight. "He's coming back," Ezra murmured, "so we need to find what he's after first." The boy pushed at the barn doors. The chain was dented, but still intact. With effort, he unclasped it and pulled one door open enough to slip inside. Rufus followed, sniffing the air, tail low but alert. Inside the barn smelled of age-old hay oil and something faintly metallic. Sunlight pierced through cracks in the roof, casting thin beams of gold across the dust. Ezra's sneakers crunched softly on the wood floor. He'd been here before, but something felt different now. He looked at the tools still hanging on the walls, the broken ladder, the shadows that seemed to hold their breath. Then, without meaning to, he lifted the cane and tapped it gently against the floorboards. The sound came back solid at first. Thunk, 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 until one tap made a sound that didn't match. A low, hollow thud, deeper and echoing like a drum under the floor. Ezra froze his eyes wide. He tapped again in the same spot. Hollow. Rufus barked once, tail wagging now, as if to say there. "Good boy," Ezra said, dropping to his knees. He brushed aside the dust and hay, revealing 3 planks that didn't fit perfectly with the others. The edges were too clean, the nails newer. He pried one with the end of the cane. It lifted with a groan, revealing a layer of metal beneath. A hatch. The surface was dull gray, engraved with a looping design that shimmered faintly when the sunlight hit it. Right in the center was a keyhole, small and circular, surrounded by carved words, so worn he had to lean close to read them. What's kept in faith returns in truth. His heart pounded as he pulled the brass key from his neck. The shape matched perfectly. He slid it in, turned it once, and heard a soft click. Then nothing. Rufus tilted his head, whining. Ezra turned it again, right then left. Another click and a faint hiss like air escaping. Slowly, the metal hatch lifted an inch on its own, releasing a musty breath of cool air from below. Ezra pushed it open wider, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. He aimed his flashlight down. The light only reached a few steps before fading into shadow. He swallowed hard. "Guess this is where we go," he whispered, voice trembling but determined. Rufus barked once, as if to remind him he wasn't alone. Together they descended. Each step creaked but held firm. The air was damp and cool, carrying the faint scent of cedar and oil. The stairwell ended in a small underground room, no bigger than a closet, its walls lined with shelves holding jars, tools, and dusty ledgers. But at the far end, a second door caught his eye. A small one, maybe 2 feet tall, sealed with an iron latch that bore the same swirling pattern as the hatch above. Ezra reached for it, but stopped when his flashlight beam glinted off something beside it, a tin box half buried in the dirt. He brushed it off and lifted the lid. Inside lay a book, its leather cover cracked with age but still intact. The initials EB were embossed on the front. Eliza Boone, he breathed. He sat on the step and opened it carefully. The pages were fragile yellowed, but the handwriting inside was steady and graceful. He began to read. May 12th, 1947. Jonas works through the night again. He says it must be perfect, that what he's building isn't just for us, but for whoever carries our name when we're gone. I don't ask questions anymore. I only pray he finishes before the men return. Ezra frowned. The men. Could that mean the same kind of people who'd come last night he kept reading? May 14th. I heard him speaking to Harlan. He said the chamber must hold until blood returns to blood. He's made 2 keys, not 1. He says one guards the way the other gives permission. He said faith will be the door and truth the light. Rufus rested his chin on Ezra's leg as if listening too. 2 keys, Ezra whispered. That's us, huh, boy? You and me. He turned another page. May 17th. Jonas sealed it today. He wouldn't tell me what's inside, only that it's not gold or money, but something far greater. He said it will make things right when the time is right. The next few pages were blank, except for one line at the end of the journal. If you find this, follow the light beneath. Beneath. Ezra lifted his flashlight and scanned the dirt floor. Near the corner of the room, he noticed a faint glimmer. He brushed away the dust and found a tiny glass orb embedded in the ground, cracked but still glowing faintly from within like a trapped firefly. "What are you?" he whispered, touching it. The orb pulsed once, and the faint hum of machinery stirred somewhere behind the wall. A panel shifted, revealing a second passage, narrow wooden leading deeper underground. Rufus growled softly, uneasy, but not refusing. Ezra's pulse raced. He stepped closer, shined the light into the passage, and saw that it ended only 10 feet ahead with what looked like a door made of iron and wood. "The chamber," he said. He reached out to touch the latch, but it was locked. He tried the brass key, but it didn't fit. Then he remembered the cane. He lifted it, twisting the ram's horn top, and a small compartment clicked open, revealing another key, this one silver delicate shaped like a heart. He smiled through the rush of fear. 2 keys, he murmured. He fit the silver key into the latch. It turned smoothly. The door creaked open an inch, revealing only darkness beyond. Before he could push further, Rufus barked sharply, stepping between him and the door. The sound echoed off the walls. Then faintly from above came the crunch of gravel. Ezra froze. Rufus growled louder. The air inside the narrow tunnel was cold and still smelling of wet earth and old wood. Ezra crouched low as he moved the faint glow from the cracked glass orb, casting ghostly shadows on the dirt walls. Behind him, Rufus followed close, his paws silent, his breath steady but watchful. Above them, faint thuds echoed through the barn floor. The intruder was still there, pacing, searching. Each step made the ceiling dust rain down in tiny streams. Ezra clutched the diary to his chest, both keys tangled around his fingers, and whispered, "We can't stop now, boy. We're too close." Rufus grunted softly as if he understood. The tunnel turned sharply, and the walls widened until Ezra could stand upright again. His flashlight flickered barely enough to cut through the dark, but the beam caught something ahead. A small door made of planks nailed together, half buried in the dirt. The hinges were reinforced with iron bands that had rusted into the color of dried blood. Across the center of the door, carved deep into the wood, were the initials J.B. Jonas Boone Ezra breathed. The sound of his own voice steadied him. The door had no handle, just 2 circular locks side by side, one brass, one silver. 2 keys, he said softly. He lifted the brass key first, the one Harlan had given him, and fitted into the left lock. It turned smoothly with a satisfying click. Then he took the silver heart-shaped key from the hidden compartment in the cane and slid it into the right lock. For a moment, he hesitated. He thought of his mother, of the photo of Jonas and Eliza, of Harlan's warning that some things weren't meant to be found too easily. Then he turned the second key. The lock clicked once, then again, and the door shifted with a low groan, the sound of wood releasing after decades of silence. A rush of cold air poured from the opening, smelling of cedar oil and time itself. Rufus barked, once startled by the sudden movement, but Ezra held the door steady. "It's okay, boy. We're where he wanted us to be." They stepped inside. The chamber was larger than Ezra expected, its ceiling low, but its walls built with precision, the wood sealed tight with pitch. Lanterns lined the corners, their glass unbroken, as though someone had just placed them there yesterday. At the center of the room stood a large wooden table covered in cloth. On top sat a small chest no bigger than a toolbox, wrapped in layers of faded canvas. Ezra approached slowly, each step deliberate. His hands trembled as he brushed away the dust. On the canvas, he found a folded note pinned with a nail. The handwriting was steady, confident. He read it out loud. "If this finds you, then the Boone blood has kept its word. Inside this chest lies what they could not take, though they tried. Do not fear what shines, for it carries both burden and blessing. Guard it well, for the world will not understand." It was signed Jonas Boone. Ezra's pulse quickened. He removed the nail and carefully unwrapped the canvas. The chest underneath was made of dark walnut, its lock shaped like a vine twisting into a circle. The silver key fit perfectly. He turned it, and the lid lifted with a soft sigh, releasing a puff of air that smelled faintly of metal and perfume. Inside, resting on red velvet, was something he could hardly believe. A golden egg, smooth and polished its surface, engraved with tiny swirling lines forming the Boone crest. At the top, a small sapphire glimmered like a captured flame. "What in the world?" Ezra whispered. He reached out and touched it. The metal was cold but pulsed faintly under his fingers, as though alive. Rufus sniffed it, tail wagging uncertainly, caught between curiosity and caution. "It's okay," Ezra said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. Beneath the egg was another folded paper, more fragile than the first. He lifted it carefully. The ink had faded, but the message was clear enough to read. "To my blood that follows what you hold is not gold for greed, but gold for proof. Men came to steal what was ours. They buried lies to hide what we built. This will show the truth when the time is right. Harlan will know when to bring the key." Ezra felt his chest tighten. Harlan. The old man had known more than he let on. The note was dated nearly 75 years earlier. He knew about all this, Ezra murmured. He imagined Harlan as a young man helping Jonas build these tunnels, sealing away this artifact to protect it from the kind of men who'd come last night. He looked at the egg again. The Boone crest on its surface was split by a small seam running around its middle. Carefully, he pressed at the edge. The top half lifted slightly, revealing a hollow interior lined with felt. Inside lay a roll of parchment sealed with red wax. The seal bore a symbol he didn't recognize, a hand clutching a flame. Rufus growled low, sensing Ezra's unease. He broke the seal gently. The parchment was covered in drawings and notes, blueprints of some kind, schematics for machines buildings, and something labeled Project Heartline. Beneath that title were words scrawled in smaller handwriting: filed patent, stolen, names falsified, truth reserved for heir, Patton Ezra whispered. He was an inventor. The realization hit hard. Jonas Boone hadn't just been a farmer or a builder. He'd been someone important, someone whose work had been stolen. Maybe that's what the intruder wanted, the proof that could expose whatever theft had buried the Boone name in silence. A creak echoed from above. Rufus growled again, eyes locked on the ceiling. Footsteps. The intruder was still there, pacing directly above them. The boards groaned, dust falling like rain. Ezra quickly rewrapped the egg and the parchment, stuffing them into his backpack. "We can't stay," he whispered. He grabbed both keys, pocketed the diary, and blew out the small lanterns that had flickered to life from his flashlight beam. He and Rufus moved toward the tunnel entrance, but then the sound of splintering wood froze them in place. The hatch above the tunnel had given way. Heavy footsteps descended. The man was coming down. Ezra ducked behind a wooden beam. Rufus pressed to his side, both of them silent but trembling. A faint light swept across the chamber. The man had a flashlight. "I know you found it." The voice called the same one Ezra had heard before. "Hand it over, and you can walk out alive." The light passed over the table, paused where the chest had sat, then moved across the walls. "You're just a kid," the man said, tone shifting to something mocking. "You don't even know what you're holding. That thing belongs to the Ashworths, to the men who built these mountains." Ezra gritted his teeth. "No," he whispered under his breath. "It belongs to the Boones." Rufus growled deep in his throat. The man turned toward the sound. The beam of his flashlight hit the far corner where Ezra crouched. "There you are," he said, stepping forward. Before Ezra could move, Rufus lunged his bark, exploding in the tight space. The flashlight crashed to the ground, the beam spinning wildly across the walls. The man shouted, trying to kick the dog off. Ezra grabbed the cane, swung hard, and struck the man's hand. The flashlight went dark. In the confusion, Ezra bolted for the tunnel, Rufus right behind him. The man cursed, scrambling to his feet. "You can't run forever, boy," he yelled. "You don't even know what you've got." Ezra didn't look back. He sprinted through the narrow tunnel, his breath burning in his chest, the backpack heavy on his shoulders. The brass and silver keys clinked together like chimes of destiny. The forest around Ash Hollow was dark by the time Ezra and Rufus stopped running. The moon hung low, casting streaks of silver across the treetops, and the wind carried the smell of rain mixed with pine sap. Ezra's lungs burned, his shoes soaked from the creek, his backpack thudding heavily against his spine with every step. He didn't know how far they'd come, only that the barn was long gone from sight. Rufus walked close at his side, his fur slick and muddy, but his eyes bright, always scanning the shadows. They moved until the land began to slope upward again, the ground turning rocky beneath their feet. That's when Ezra saw it. A small wooden shed tucked behind a rise of stone, its door hanging crooked, the roof half collapsed. It looked like it had been part of the Boone property once, maybe used for tools or livestock before time swallowed it. "We'll rest here," Ezra whispered, his breath clouding in the chill. Rufus sniffed the door, then pushed it open with his shoulder. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rain-soaked wood. Broken crates lined the walls, and a rusted lantern hung from a nail. Ezra set down the backpack and reached for his flashlight. The beam flickered across the floor, catching the edge of a trap door in the corner. His pulse quickened. Another one. "You see that boy?" he murmured. Rufus wagged his tail once, barking softly. Ezra brushed aside the dirt and pried it open. Beneath a narrow ladder led down into darkness. The air that rose from below was cold and dry, like a space untouched for decades. He hesitated, thinking of what had happened under the barn, but the same voice that had driven him this far whispered that he was meant to keep going. He slung the backpack over his shoulder, held the flashlight between his teeth, and descended. The ladder creaked, but held steady. When his feet touched the ground, the light revealed a space unlike anything he'd seen before. It wasn't just another storage chamber. It was a workshop. Shelves lined the walls filled with tools, old blueprints, glass jars of screws and bolts, and rolled parchments labeled in neat handwriting. Design Drafts Boone, 1945. In the center stood a large wooden workbench, its surface coated in dust. A brass lamp hung above it, still connected to a wire running along the ceiling. Ezra turned the switch out of instinct, and to his astonishment, the bulb flickered to life, powered by an old generator humming softly in the corner. Rufus barked once, startled by the sudden glow. Easy boy Ezra whispered, eyes wide. He built this. Jonas built all of this. On the far wall hung a faded map of North Carolina, marked with red pins and circles. In the corner of the map, the words Project Heartline appeared again. He unrolled the blueprints from the table sketches of gears, pistons, and strange machines labeled with technical notes beyond his understanding. But in the margins, he recognized familiar phrases from Eliza Boone's diary. "Faith will be the door. Truth will be the light." He pulled the golden egg from his backpack and set it gently on the table. The metal gleamed even under the weak light. Rufus sniffed it, tail wagging uncertainly. Ezra stared at the egg, remembering how it had glowed faintly when he'd opened it before. Maybe this was where it was meant to be used. He took the brass key and fit it into a small groove at the base of the egg, then pressed the silver one into the slot near the top. Both clicked into place, and for a second nothing happened. Then the seams along the egg's surface began to glow faint blue, tracing the Boone crest in light. The egg hummed, vibrating softly. Rufus backed away, barking once, startled by the sound. Ezra leaned closer, heart racing. The egg twisted on its own, its top half rotating until it clicked open. A pulse of light projected upward, painting symbols and shapes into the air. It wasn't just light. It was a map. A three-dimensional projection hovered above the workbench, showing the outline of the Blue Ridge Mountains, with glowing points scattered across it. One point blinked brighter than the others, right where Ash Hollow sat. Another blinked miles east, near an abandoned mining site labeled Ashworth Iron Works. A line connected the two. Ezra stared speechless. He turned the brass key again, and text appeared beside the line, "Original prototype filed 1947. Evidence concealed." His voice trembled. He hid proof of what they stole. The message continued to scroll. "Retrieve and deliver to rightful blood. Trust the keeper if he remains." Harlan Pitts. Jonas must have known that one day his heir would return, that someone like Ezra would need guidance to finish what he started. He built the workshop, the egg, the map. All of it, Ezra whispered. Rufus wagged his tail as if proud of their discovery. But the sense of triumph faded quickly when Ezra heard a noise from above, a creak, then the dull thud of a door closing. Someone else was in the shed. He turned off the lamp and crouched low, holding Rufus still. The faint shuffle of boots moved across the wooden floorboards. Then a voice, low, angry, and unmistakable, cut through the silence. "You've been busy, kid." It was the man from the barn. Ezra's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. The man moved closer to the trap door. "You think you can run around playing hero? That egg you got doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Ashworth family. Jonas Boone was a thief. He stole what didn't belong to him." The man's boot hit the ladder, making it shake. Rufus growled deep, ready to strike. Ezra looked at the egg, its light still glowing faintly. The projection shimmered, and he saw one more message appear in the air. "If danger returns, light the way home." He didn't understand, but he knew it meant something important. He grabbed the egg, pressed the brass key once more, and the light flared, filling the chamber with brilliance so bright it blinded him. Above, the man cursed, stumbling back from the sudden flash. Rufus barked and leapt up the ladder, his claws scraping wood. Ezra followed, clutching the egg against his chest. When he reached the top, the intruder was still shielding his eyes. Without thinking, Ezra swung the cane with all his strength. It struck the man's shoulder, knocking him sideways. The flashlight clattered to the ground. Rufus lunged again, barking furiously. "Get back!" the man shouted, stumbling toward the open door. "You don't know what you're messing with, boy." He bolted into the night, disappearing into the trees. Ezra fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The egg in his hands had stopped glowing, its surface now cool and still. Rufus licked his face, once tail wagging as if to say they'd made it through another battle. Ezra looked around the small shed, the silence settling again. "He's not giving up," he said softly. "But neither are we." He looked at the map still burned into his mind. The blinking point near the old mining site that had to be where Jonas's prototype was hidden. The truth. The proof that could restore the Boone name. He wrapped the egg back in the canvas, packed the keys, and slung the backpack over his shoulder. "Tomorrow," he told Rufus, "we go there. We finish it." The dog barked once sharp and sure. The sun rose sharp and golden over Ash Hollow, painting the valley with light that looked almost too clean for the truth it hid. Ezra hadn't slept. He sat outside the shed with the golden egg resting in his lap, watching how the dawn light caught its curves and set the Boone crest shimmering faintly. The air was cold and still, the kind of morning where even the birds hesitated before singing. Rufus lay beside him, chin on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. The events of the night before replayed over and over in Ezra's mind, the intruder's voice, the flash of light, the map that pointed toward Ashworth Ironworks. Every piece of it clicked into place now, forming a picture that was both terrifying and clear. Jonas Boone hadn't been a thief. He had been robbed. His work had been stolen, his name buried, and the people who had taken it had spent decades pretending it was theirs. The boy stared at the forest stretching out beyond the hollow and whispered, "They're still out there, boy. The same kind of men. And they ain't done yet." Rufus barked once, a low sound that felt like agreement. The sound of an engine broke the silence. Ezra tensed immediately. He saw the flash of sunlight on metal through the trees before the black car rolled into view, tires crunching over gravel. The Buick. He felt his stomach twist. The car stopped at the gate, and a man stepped out adjusting his suit jacket. It was the same one from the barn, though now he looked cleaner, his hair slicked back, his expression calm. He carried a leather briefcase and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning," the man called, voice smooth as oil. "You must be Ezra Boone." Ezra said nothing, his hand tightening on the cane beside him. Rufus growled a deep warning rumble. "Easy there, son," the man said, holding up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. Name's Mr. Calder. I work with the Department of Historical Preservation. We're interested in your grandfather's property." He spoke with rehearsed ease, the kind of voice that had tricked people before. "You found something valuable," Calder continued. "A historical artifact. We just want to make sure it's handled properly." Ezra tilted his head. "You mean the golden egg?" he asked, watching for any flicker in the man's eyes. Calder hesitated only for a second before nodding. "Exactly. That's government property, son. Dangerous in the wrong hands." Rufus barked sharply at the word, dangerous. Ezra stood slowly, meeting the man's gaze. "You saying my great-granddaddy's work belongs to you?" Calder smiled thinly. "Let's not complicate things with family stories. You're young. You don't understand what you're sitting on. That device is unstable, could hurt someone. Hand it over, and I'll make sure you're compensated properly." Ezra didn't move. His voice came quiet but steady. "Funny thing," he said. "Harlan told me you weren't no historian. Said you'd been creeping around these hills long before I showed up." Calder's smile slipped. "You talked to Pitts?" "Yeah," Ezra said. "Said you came from Ashworth Ironworks. Said you were looking for what my family built." Calder's eyes hardened. "That old fool doesn't know what he's talking about." He took a step forward, but Rufus snarled, teeth bared, stopping him cold. "That dog's got a good nose," Ezra said. "He remembered your scent from the barn." Calder's mask cracked. His voice dropped low. "You don't know what that thing really is. You think it's some kind of treasure, but it's not. It's evidence. It could ruin powerful people, the kind of people who won't let a kid with a mutt keep it." "Then I guess I better hold on tight," Ezra said, his heartbeat hammering. Calder's tone changed again, suddenly soft. "Ezra," he said, "be smart. They'll come for you next. I'm offering you a way out. You give me that egg and you get to walk away with a future. Otherwise..." He didn't finish the sentence. The threat hung in the air like a knife waiting to drop. Rufus barked again, stepping forward. Ezra held up a hand. "You want it so bad," he said, "I'll give it to you." He turned and walked back into the shed, the man following a few cautious steps behind. On the table inside sat a wooden box about the same size as the chest that had held the egg. Ezra picked it up carefully. Calder's eyes gleamed. "Good," he said. "You're doing the right thing." Ezra handed it over without another word. The man opened it just enough to see something golden glinting inside. Satisfied, he closed it again, gave Ezra a look that could have been mistaken for pity, and said, "You just saved yourself a world of trouble." He walked back to his car, climbed in, and drove off down the hill. The sound of the engine faded until only the wind remained. Rufus tilted his head, confused. Ezra grinned faintly and opened his backpack, revealing the real golden egg tucked safely inside next to Eliza Boone's diary. "He bought it," Ezra said. "That's just brass and scrap I polished up last night." Rufus barked, once tail wagging. "You really think I'd give him the real thing?" Ezra added. He felt lighter now, but the relief was short-lived. From down the road came the faint echo of another engine. Then from the trees a figure emerged, Harlan Pitts, his old denim jacket smeared with dirt, his breath heavy. "You all right, boy?" he called. "Saw that black car heading your way and figured you'd need a hand." Ezra smiled. "I'm fine," he said, holding up the backpack. "Got what matters." Harlan nodded, but his eyes darkened when he saw the fear still lingering in Ezra's. "They won't stop," the old man said. "You know that right, Ashworth's men got deep pockets and short patience." "Then we end it," Ezra replied. "We take it where the map said the old ironworks. We show the truth." Harlan looked at the boy, then the dog, then the mountains beyond. "You got more Boone in you than I ever thought," he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Found this last night in my shed. Think Jonas meant it for whoever finished his job." He handed it to Ezra. Inside was a single line written in that same steady hand. "The truth is not hidden to protect gold. It's hidden to protect hearts. Shine it only when the world's ready to listen." Ezra folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. "Guess it's time to make 'em listen," he said. Harlan's truck was parked behind the ridge, loaded with tools and an old lockbox. Together they drove toward the Ashworth site, the road winding through mist and memory. As they left the hollow, Rufus stuck his head out the window, the wind pulling at his fur. Ezra looked back one last time at the land that had changed everything. For the first time, it didn't feel haunted. It felt alive, proud, like it was finally breathing again. When they reached the crossroads, Harlan pulled over. "We'll hide the real one till you're ready to show it," he said. "You let me handle that part." He placed the golden egg and the diary into his own lockbox, sealing it tight. "You trust me with my life," Ezra said. Harlan grinned. "Then we're boons together, boy." The road to the Ashworth Iron Works wound through the mountains like a scar that refused to fade, cut deep into the stone, and lined with the skeletons of old mines and rusted rails. Harlan's truck rumbled steadily along the cracked pavement, its engine groaning under the weight of decades and secrets. Ezra sat in the passenger seat, his hands clasped tightly around the handle of the cane. The sun had barely risen, and mist still clung to the hollows, curling through the trees like breath. Rufus lay between them, his head on Ezra's knee, eyes open alert, even in rest. The air felt heavier the closer they got, charged with something that made Ezra's heart race faster. The golden egg and Eliza Boone's diary rested safely in Harlan's lockbox behind the seat, the proof they'd been carrying like a flame through darkness. "You sure about this, boy?" Harlan asked, his eyes fixed on the road. "Ain't no turning back after this. Once it's out for good." Ezra nodded, his voice steady, despite the fear crawling up his spine. "Jonas built it for a reason," he said. "And if he died protecting it, the least I can do is finish it." Harlan gave a slow nod. "Then let's do it right." When they reached the site, the ironworks rose before them like a fallen cathedral. The main building was a vast shell of rusted metal windows, shattered roof sagging inward. Old conveyor belts sat frozen in place, and vines crept up the walls as if trying to reclaim what man had abandoned. The smell of iron and rain hung thick in the air. They parked the truck and stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath their boots, echoing against the emptiness. Rufus trotted ahead, nose to the ground, tail stiff. He barked once and ran toward the far end of the yard, where a large hatch half hidden beneath weeds jutted from the earth. "He's found something," Harlan said, following. They cleared away the vines, revealing a metal door sealed with a heavy lock. Across its face was the Boone crest, two hands clasping over a flame. Ezra's pulse jumped. "That's it," he whispered. "That's his mark." He pulled the brass key from his neck, fitted into the lock, and turned. The mechanism clicked, and the hatch opened with a hiss of stale air. Below them, a staircase descended into darkness. They followed it down the flashlight beam, cutting through dust thick as fog. The stairs ended in a chamber lined with machines, huge gears pipes, and polished metal tools covered in grime, but still gleaming beneath the dirt. On the far side of the room stood a covered object, shaped like an engine. Harlan helped Ezra pull away the tarp, revealing a machine unlike anything either of them had seen. It looked almost alive, a web of brass, copper, and crystal gears intertwined with precision, its surface engraved with mathematical symbols and words carved in Boone handwriting. Heartline prototype Ezra read aloud. "Jonas Boone, 1947. He reached out and touched the surface, feeling the faint hum of energy beneath. Harlan whistled softly. "Still running after all this time. Damn genius, that man." Rufus circled the machine, barking once as if urging them on. Ezra turned to Harlan. "We need to record this. If Calder's men find us, they can't bury it again. Harlan nodded, pulling an old camcorder from his pack. This thing still works. Guess we'll see. They filmed every inch of the machine, the symbols, the inscription on the plaque. Ezra spoke directly to the camera, his voice trembling but strong. My name is Ezra Boone. This belongs to my family. My great-grandfather Jonas built this machine to change the way power could be made and shared. It was stolen from him by the men who called themselves Ashworth. This is proof. The truth doesn't belong to those who take it, it belongs to those who keep faith. Harlan smiled faintly. Your mama would be proud, boy. The moment hung heavy and perfect until the echo of engines shattered it. Tires screeched on the gravel above. Voices shouted. They're here, Harlan said. He grabbed the camcorder and shoved it into his jacket. We got what we came for. Let's move. But it was too late. The staircase above filled with shadows, flashlights cutting through the dark. Calder's voice rang out. Didn't I tell you, boy? You can't hide forever. He descended with 2 men behind him, each holding pistols. Step away from the machine, Harlan raised his hands slowly. You don't want to do this, son. The world's already seen your face, Calder laughed. You think some grainy video's gonna matter? I'll take the machine, take the proof, and when they find you, no one will even know what you died for. Rufus growled, stepping between Ezra and the men. Easy boy, Ezra whispered. But the dog was already trembling, ready to fight. Calder motioned to one of his men. Grab the kid. The man moved forward. Rufus lunged. The gun went off the shot, echoing through the chamber like thunder. Ezra shouted, diving toward Rufus as the man stumbled back. The dog yelped but kept his jaws locked on the man's arm. Calder swung his pistol toward Ezra, but before he could fire, Harlan charged, knocking him off balance. The gun fell, sliding across the floor. Ezra grabbed it and aimed. Stop, he yelled. The sound froze the room. Calder glared at him, panting. You don't have it in you. Ezra's hands shook, but his eyes didn't. You're right, he said. I'm not like you. He fired once into the ceiling. The echo made Calder flinch. But I don't have to be, Ezra continued, because the world already knows. Harlan pulled the camcorder from his jacket and pressed play. The small screen flickered, showing Ezra's earlier words. We uploaded it before we left, Harlan said, grinning through blood on his lip. You lose, son. Calder's face twisted in rage. You think anyone will believe a kid? They don't have to, Ezra said. They'll see the proof. Rufus barked again, limping but standing tall beside him. The men hesitated, uncertain. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Someone must have called after hearing the shots. Calder's men bolted, leaving him alone. He looked at Ezra, hatred burning behind his eyes. You don't know what you've started, he hissed. This isn't over. It is for me, Ezra said quietly. Because I'm done hiding. Calder ran for the stairs, disappearing into the light. When the echoes faded, Ezra dropped the gun and knelt beside Rufus. The dog's shoulder was bleeding but shallow. You're okay, boy, he whispered, tears mixing with the grime on his face. You're the bravest Boone there ever was. Rufus wagged his tail weakly and rested his head in Ezra's lap. Harlan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You did it, son. You gave them back their name. Outside, the morning had fully broken sunlight spilling through the trees like gold reborn. Within hours, news of the discovery had spread. Reporters, historians, and locals filled Ash Hollow, all speaking the same name, Jonas Boone. The machine was secured, the video played across the country, and the truth could no longer be buried. Weeks later, the Boone land was restored, marked as a historical trust under Ezra's care. The barn was rebuilt, the old house cleaned and painted, and a new sign stood by the gate. The Boone Legacy Workshop, in honor of Jonas and Eliza Boone. The end. If this story touched your heart, hit like and subscribe to keep these stories alive. Tell me what you think about Ezra's journey. Did the ending mean something to you? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from.